Hey guys, it's Libby. Guess who I brought? It's David. If you've been here, were you confused? Did you not know who it was?
I was waiting for someone to guess.
Okay. I was watching Katie's For the Love of Classics tag, Katie from Books and Things. I actually didn't even finish watching her video because I just wanted to answer these questions so bad. And David was available and will grace us with his presence. Do you have a question?
What is a tag?
Oh, a tag. I've done tags before. You watched my tag videos.
I'm sure I have.
Yeah, a tag is a video. Typically, it's a list of questions that you answer, and then you tag other people to answer them.
Okay.
So you can find out what they think. Sometimes it's an activity. So like the ice bucket challenge was a form of tag.
So you were actively selected for this.
No,
privilege.
sometimes you select yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Sometimes you just want to.
Now I understand.
Sometimes you break the rules.
Got it.
First question. Why do you read classics, and how often do you read classics? I read classics because I want to read books that are good, and I think a lot of the classics are good, and it's convenient that time has passed so that we can filter out all of the not good ones. And I'm sure that there are some hidden gems in random works from the 18th century that no one's heard of nowadays. And I'm sad that I'm missing those, but at least I can get access to some of the good ones. And how often do I read them? I thought that I read classics all the time. Then last year I looked at my Goodreads thing, and I realized in 2016 I'd read some Shakespeare, but the only Victorian literature I'd read was some Poe short stories, which I actually didn't really enjoy. And I think that's because I normally listen to classics on audiobook, and I had a Scribd subscription last year. That's surprisingly hard to say. Scribd subscription. So I was listening to modern audiobooks, but I have let my Scribd subscription subside. And other words beginning with S. So I'm back to my classic audiobooks. Do you read classics, David? You don't read books. So
I read about one book a year, roughly. I'd say 80% of those books are nonfiction. And I'd say probably...
Which can be classics.
Which can be classics. And I'd say probably 40% are something that I'd consider a classic. So I read about 40% of a classic book a year.
That sounds about right, because you are about 25% of the way through
Yeah.
Les Miserables.
Yeah.
And have been for several months.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Scribd subscription subside, Scribd subscription subside, Scribd subscription subside, Scribd subscription subside, Scribd subscription subside.
That's pretty good.
That's yeah.
A minus.
A minus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. Second question. What is a period / country / culture that you haven't read many classics from and would like to? I might make David a little bit mad because I'm going to say feudal Japan. David is a feudal China type of person.
Wow. First of all...
Is that unfair?
It's a little unfair.
Every time I talk about Japan, you get mad and become a cynophile at me.
I do? I didn't know that.
Yes,
but
you
okay.
do.
Alright.
Every time I talk about how much I love ramen or Japanese gardens.
You're right.
You are
feudal
condescending.
Chinese art is inherently superior.
Yeah, you do that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure China's great. But I've been to Japan, so I have more of a cultural milieu in my brain to insert that into. And I know that my mom read the Pillow Book of Sei Shonagon and enjoyed that. And also, Tale of Genji. Book of the Five Rings, is that good? Have you read it?
Very good, yes.
Okay.
It's one of the finest pieces of literature ever produced in all of human history.
Okay, so, I feel like I should maybe
I'm not sure it would be to your tastes.
Whatever.
But...
Okay. Cool.
I would really like to read classic literature, and really relatively ancient historical literature from sub-Saharan Africa. Now, obviously, there's some practical impediments to this. which is why I so...
Were they writing things down?
Not a lot, which is
Okay.
why I so fervently... But that I would learn and gain so much from that. Mainly because no one else would have done it yet.
Right.
But if I would that would be so cool. I'd be learning a lot.
If you were like gonna be, if you were a millionaire and were gonna be an academic, is that what you would have gotten your PhD in?
No.
Okay. If you got 6 PhDs with your whatever.
Maybe.
You
Yeah.
had?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ancient African literature. Absolutely. Yes.
There you go. Question 3. Which modern book do you think will be a classic in 100 years' time? Okay, I have an actual answer to this, and then I have a rant, which is kind of inspired by this. So first, rants. I'll make you listen to it before you get the actual answer. You may have heard, this is my favorite book of all time. It's called Rebecca. It's by Daphne du Maurier. It's amazing. So Daphne du Maurier is kind of maligned in academia. She's not held very highly of. You're not going to find books or courses about her books in universities. And like some of her books are not amazing, but Rebecca is amazing. And it was written in the 1930s. And I think part of why it didn't really get accepted by the Ivory Tower folks is that it is a very feminine novel. It is about a woman. It's about women's issues, which are sometimes experienced by men, but I'd say more experienced by women, and you're getting it from a woman's perspective here. And you may not know this, but people were like kind of sexist in the mid-20th century and also every other time in history. So I think that is why this book didn't really catch on.
Well, I think...
It's definitely a part of it.
I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I think it's sort of hit by a double-edged sword in that it is a distinctly feminine novel, aggressively feminine novel in some ways, and that I think that what did hurt it, especially at the time of its publication. But it is also not what I would describe as a particularly feminist novel.
No,
per
it's
se.
not feminist.
Yeah, not.
The main character is not admirable. She's
not particular.
Yeah, she's not
She's
Jane
not
Eyre.
hugely in it, but and so as a result, it's not the modern scholars often are interested in reviving its legacy to reclaim, their to recompense for the crimes that have been committed against them.
Right.
So it's sort of been hit with double-edged sword there. But I, as someone who doesn't know a lot about literature, admittedly, have read Rebecca, and I would say it's definitely a book that has serious intellectual and academic merit.
Yeah. So this is the book that I want to be a classic in 100 years. Books that I actually think will be a classic in 100 years. Also, this is a little not fair because it's, 80 years old.
It's a very thick copy of Rebecca.
It's a long book. I left my bookmark in it.
Shorter than all the other copies of Rebecca that I've seen. Thicker than all the copies.
Of Rebecca?
Well, you used to have that very little one that I read from.
Oh, was the font really small or something?
I don't know.
Kind of. This has a little bit of extra matter at the end, but not that much.
Whatever.
Anyway, books that I think will actually be classics in 100 years' time, the works of Michel Faber. Namely, I think his, to make a pun, which you will see in a second, his body of work is appealing because even though he writes across a lot of different genres, his works all have a unifying theme, which is he writes about like the physicality of human and sometimes non-human bodies. And then he hits that from like all these different angles, religious angles, science fiction angles, historical angles. And so I think studying his works as a whole would be something useful to academics of the future. Hi, academics of the future, if you're watching this. Thanks, honey. What if they're an anthropologist studying booktube?
I'm gonna quit while I'm behind you.
Okay.
I would list two. Again, the question between predict and want is tricky here. But the two are Watchmen by Alan Moore. Okay. Which, in my opinion, is easily the most underrated work of literature in the last 50 years.
Okay.
And
when was it published? The 80s?
Yeah, late 80s.
Okay.
It was published serially, so. Okay. Initially, and my other answer would be Gödel, Escher, Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid by Douglas Hofstadter, which is nonfiction.
It is harder to get nonfiction to be a classic.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's a good one.
Okay. Question number 4. What is the last classic you read? To the Goodreads. This is an audiobook. It was Anne Veronica by H.G. Wells. I talked about it in my most recent wrap up.
The Lady and the Tiger.
The Lady and the Tiger? It's The Lady or the Tiger, David. Or did you read something else called The Lady and the Tiger?
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Is it or? Okay.
Lady or the Tiger.
Lady or the Tiger, then.
Yep. One of them, feminist. One of them, the opposite of feminist.
Which one is the opposite of feminist?
Yours.
It's the opposite of feminist?
Yeah. It's not great. What's the first classic you ever read? Okay. I don't really remember. I wasn't making lists at the time. I think I have a bit of a confession to make. I started reading 2 classics when I was young, but I was not literary enough to finish them. First, I started reading Jane Eyre when I was, 9 or 10. And I got about a chapter in, and I was like, this is just about a really unhappy child that everyone's mean to.
Yep.
I don't want to read this. Funnily enough, this is exactly the same reaction that I had to Harry Potter. My mom was fairly early on board the Harry Potter bandwagon, and she tried to read them to me, and she read the first couple chapters to me, and I was like, Mom, this is just about a really sad kid. I don't care. I don't want to know.
The difference is, in Harry Potter, eventually it stops being about that.
I'm sorry, guys. I have turmeric in my nose from making dal, so that's why I keep scratching my nose.
Oh, okay, yeah, someone did.
Look like Afghan food.
She does.
My
answer.
Wait, no, I didn't actually get to
sorry.
the first classic I read, so I don't actually remember. Some guesses. Oh, and then after I failed at reading Jane Eyre, I tried to read Sense and Sensibility because I wanted to be a cultured person who reads Jane Austen, but I was 10. So I got basically through volume 1 of Sense and Sensibility, which is a 3-volume novel. And by the end, like, my eyes were just crossing and I was trying to absorb the words, but I just could not, so I gave up. So the first classic that I actually completed, I think, was either Black Beauty by Anna Sewell, possibly Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, possibly an audiobook of Persuasion. Yeah, I think those are all the classics that I read when I was really young. So one of those, I don't remember which. Do you remember the first classic you read?
I'm guessing the Bible doesn't count.
Yeah.
Because I read all of the Bible.
Have you read all of the Bible?
I have read all of the Bible.
Okay. In front to back?
No, I
cover to
didn't.
cover? Okay.
So I'm guessing that doesn't count. And if that doesn't
Really?
count, then my next answer is when I was 6 or 7, I read the Tao Te Ching. I don't know if that
Okay.
counts.
I'd say that does count.
And then between the ages of 5 to 8, I read / had read to me / listened to audiobook The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I read a lot of it. I don't know if I ever sat down and read The Hobbit all at once. But I started having it read to me when I was 4 or 5, and as well as Lord of the Rings, and read and listened to audiobooks and had those books read to me many, many times between the ages of 5 and 8.
I also started reading The Hobbit. My dad read it to me, and then I got bored and we stopped.
So that somewhere in there is my answer to that question.
Okay. 6. Favorite classic book cover. I don't have a very good answer to this because I know
reject this question.
I know that there's a whole there's a penchant now, to quote Mrs. Van Hopper, for having really beautifully designed collections of classics, mainly Jane Austen, sometimes the Brontes. What I really don't like about the collections of the Brontes is that it never contains all of the Brontes' works. There need to be 7 books, 4 by Charlotte, 2 by Anne, 1 by Emily, and then I would like there to be a book that is their poetry and juvenilia. But I'm okay if that doesn't exist. But I have yet to find a collection of Bronte works that contains all 7, even the Professor, even Shirley. Shots fired. And I would love to have a matchy collection of all the works of Daphne du Maurier or Thomas Hardy. Do they exist? No. So this question makes me bitter.
In my mind, most books don't have a cover that I think of, that is the cover of that book. So I'm kind of uncomfortable with this question. But, as I said, Probably my best answer to that would be the autobiography of Malcolm X, which
Is that the famous picture of Malcolm X?
I don't know. There are several famous pictures of Malcolm X.
The one that's famous to me.
Well, there's one. It's the main thing is that it's a drawing, not a photograph.
It's not. It's not the one where his glasses are slightly down. And he's
I don't
looking
think
up.
so. No. So I read that when I was 8 or 9. Had a really big effect on me, and I remember that cover, and I thought it was beautiful and insightful and very relevant to the work. So that'd probably be my answer. It's that's the late 20th century, so, but I think it would be considered.
Yeah, that would probably be considered a classic. Okay, classic authors you wish had written more books. I don't know if this counts, but Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen is my favorite 20th century poet.
That's the poet, yeah.
Yeah, he's a World War I poet.
Yeah.
And he wrote, like, really good poetry. I think the best poetry in the modern era, post-Shakespeare, is all World War I, and Wilfred Owen is the best of the World War I poets. And A, I wish he had written more poetry so we could have more of his awesome poetry, and B, it means he would have lived longer, because Wilfred Owen was injured and spent a lot of time in the hospital, which is where he wrote a lot of his poems. And then he recovered enough that he could go back to the front, but he wasn't required to. He could have just gone home, but he decided to go back anyway and died 3 weeks before the end of the war. So, I wish he just stayed in hospital a little bit longer, written more poems, not died.
Malcolm X is my answer.
This was a sad question. I'm sorry, we'll try to be happier on the next one. Least favorite classic. I don't know if this is going to be happier. Okay, my least favorite classic has got to be Pamela by Samuel Richardson. I've ranted about this before. It was my least favorite book of, I think, 2015. It's an 18th century novel, and I'm of the only slightly controversial opinion that Jane Austen invented the modern novel in the early 19th century. 18th century novels just don't quite have it going on. And Pamela, it's kind of boring to read. It's not actually a novel, it's a lesson in how to write letters. And the plot is this plot that was all too common in the early modern period, which is of this, like, either this one virtuous girl or a virtuous society in general reforming this wicked man who, in many cases, either attempts to rape our heroine or actually rapes our heroine. He just attempts to rape her here. But, like, I don't want them to get together and live happily ever after. That disturbs me. And also, they get together and live happily ever after, and that's supposed to be the end, but then it goes on for another 150 pages. There's just so much wrong with the plot, with the writing style, with the length. It's a really bad book. Don't read Pamela by Samuel Richardson. The people at Slate.com, which is a website that I really enjoy, talk about how great Pamela is, and I'm like, what are you guys smoking? I don't know, because it's awful.
Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
Regardless of its ideological problems, which it's very poorly written.
Yeah.
Very poorly written.
Okay, favorite translated classic. Mine is, I have a tie. The Oresteia by Aeschylus. And this one, I guess, doesn't actually really count because I have read at least large portions of it in Greek. So to me, it's not a translated classic. But I assume that by that they mean, I don't know, do they mean work that is not in your native language that you typically read in translation? Or work that you have read in translation?
Either.
Okay. Well, my other
work
favorite...
that is not written in your native language.
Okay. Well, my other one is actually the story of the Marquis of Banneville, which I actually haven't read in English and have only read in French. But you should read it, you, English speaker, as I assume you are, who is watching my videos, which is... I try to tell you people to go read this book. It's really short. No one's read it yet, as far as I can tell. It is a transgender love story set and written in the 17th century by a transgender person. And it's adorable. What more do you want? David has a book?
The Analects of Confucius, who really is
I told you he was a Sinophile.
really is Master Kong. I don't like saying Confucius. It bothers me a lot.
Is that the best translation? Whose
Yes.
translation is that?
By
Xi Ching Huang.
is by far the best translation.
Okay. Favorite modern classic published after 1900. I mean,
We already did this.
do I have a second favorite? What do you think my favorite modern classic after 1900 that's not Rebecca
I'm not
is?
gonna do this.
Am I forgetting something that's amazing?
I don't want to be responsible for that.
Do you have a favorite? Is it going to be Malcolm X?
All the ones that I've given have been.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
I could list that. You should ask me which ones before 1900.
Yeah, do you have any before 1900 that you really like?
Les Miserables.
You haven't finished Les
No,
Miserables.
I'm sorry. I'm trying.
There's a lot of it. Okay, this one's interesting. First classic you would recommend for a child. I thought about this. I think I would go with one of the less gruesome Sherlock Holmes stories because the writing's fairly accessible and they're short. So probably The Blue Carbuncle is one I think that doesn't have any murders in it. And I also quite like The Copper Beeches, which doesn't have any murders, but is slightly disturbing. So I wouldn't generically recommend that for a child. But if it was a child I knew and I thought they could handle some eeriness, then Copper Beeches by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
This is this thing where there's a bullfinches, Greek and Roman mythology. Bullfinches, Greek and Roman mythology.
Did Bullfinch also write a King Arthur collection, or
I
is that
believe
somebody
that's
else?
correct. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I haven't read. I've only read that one word of this.
Okay. Well, you had some King Arthur
I
collection
did,
that
but
you
it's
liked.
not. I haven't been able to figure out whose it was. So
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, I might have recommended it. I very well might have.
Mystery book about King Arthur.
One day I'll figure out which book that
I
was.
feel like we did figure that out.
I feel
at
like we
some
did. I
point.
need to go back and do. We can
Yeah.
figure it out. But Bullfinches, I believe it's Greek and Roman mythology. I'm not something to that effect.
I think it's just called, if you say Bullfinch's mythology, people know what you're
okay.
talking
Bullfinch's
about.
mythology.
Yeah. Okay. Question 11. I feel like I went out of order at some point. Oh, I just did question 12. That was what would you recommend for a child. Going back to 11. Classic literary places you would like to visit.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Nowhere. Don't go back.
Don't go back in
Don't
time.
go back.
Yeah.
You need medicine and don't do it.
What if you're like, really, what if someone could design a perfect VR simulation of a world?
Also the part where I get malaria, is that part of it?
No.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay.
I don't know.
Classics you think are mistitled, and what would you title them?
Mhm.
This is hard.
Can I go first?
Yes, I do have one now.
The Analects of Master Kong. Confucius is just definitely not his
What
name.
is the title in Chinese?
Kong Fu Zi.
Okay.
Master Kong the Venerated.
Is that what the title of the book is called in Chinese?
Let's go with that.
Okay. Is that title okay?
That's fine.
Okay. What about one where the original title you think is bad?
Oh, you go first.
Okay. I have Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, which has a secondary title, which is What You Will, which is an okay title. Basically, it was called Twelfth Night because it was performed on Twelfth Night, January 6th, the 12th day of Christmas. Even though it's often set in the summer, although I think it would maybe be interesting to set Twelfth Night at Twelfth Night in the winter. It would add a lot more peril to the initial shipwreck if, like, people could freeze to death. And also, like, I think it'd be interesting to have, you know, to sort of show the carelessness of the upper classes, to have Orsino and Olivia sending Viola back and forth, like, through the snow. Okay, question 14. Your favorite classic you'd like to recommend to everyone?
Okay, I'm gonna say the autobiography of Malcolm X. I really think you should read it.
I'm-
Even if you're not really into Malcolm X or historical literature or political literature, which like I totally understand, now is a good time to maybe be willing to be a little flexible on that point. And it's very well written. It's a compelling, interesting, and true story. Here's the best thing about the autobiography of Malcolm X. Often, when you have an autobiography, you have a situation where it's someone sort of looking back on their life after they've already sort of resolved a lot of their life questions. And that colors their narrative, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not true of autobiography of Malcolm X. He wrote it with a co-author, Alex Haley, who wrote Roots, very talented author. And during the course of writing the book, Malcolm X had some major life events which made him have a totally different outlook on his life. It was the axial time in his life.
Did he finish it?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He did. It was very close, but he did.
Okay.
So during this book, and Alex Haley strongly encouraged him and said, don't go back and change what we wrote together before. That people need to see that change in this book, and it'll make it that much more compelling and real and honest. And it really succeeds on that point. So I would strongly recommend that book to everybody, even if it's definitely not your style. Give it a try. Read it from beginning to end.
I'm going to recommend Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. I think it's a good place to get into Hardy or Victorian literature. It's fairly accessible. But also, it is, aside from that, it is a manual for how to be in love. It's pretty. Have you read it? You haven't read it.
Is that the one? Is that the one where it's like the farmer and the soldier and yeah?
He's a shepherd. He becomes a farmer. At heart, he's a shepherd.
He's ruggedly good looking, not handsome.
I didn't think that the guy playing him was that good looking.
Isn't he like Czech or something? Anyway.
He's Belgian, David.
He's Belgian?
He's Belgian.
Not that Czech people can't be attractive. It's a separate question.
I feel like you just said Czech
No.
people can't be
I was like,
attractive.
isn't he like Czech? Because I remember he was British, and I was like, that dude is not British.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that throughout the entire movie.
But yeah, Far from the Madding Crowd. Good if you want Victorian literature. Good if you ever plan on falling in love with a person who's like, hey, do this, don't do this, or this. Okay? Go forth.
I don't think... I almost saw the film.
Yeah.
But in the film,
Yeah.
it doesn't make it super clear how the path that should have been taken. It was more like,
It's clearer in the book.
Yeah, in the film, it was more like, well, that was quite a path, and here we are.
They cut like my favorite scene in the film, which I'm not going to talk about because spoilers, but maybe I'll tell you about it later. If you have read it, I'll be vague enough so you know what I'm talking about. It's when Mr. Boldwood and his name is Mr. Boldwood. The heroine's name is Bathsheba. Okay, let's not complain about Boldwood. And Sergeant Troy meet in the woods.
Oh, do the two guys meet?
Yeah.
Oh, drama.
I know, and they didn't. And they didn't. The best
They
part.
totally should have left that in the movie.
best part is not.
'Cause that's the
is
thing
not
the
the
film-
men's interactions with Bathsheba. It's their interactions with each
That's
other.
the thing that film was really missing, was
Yeah.
that axial scene. Yeah, I agree. It's good analysis.
I'll find it and I'll have you read it.
Okay.
It's really good.
I'm sure it is.
Okay, question 15. Who do you tag? So this is where you pick people that you want to answer this tag. Okay, yeah.
Peter Hayward. Peter C. Hayward.
Okay.
He is a Australo-Canadian, if that's how you say that.
Australo-Canadian.
Australo-Canadian? I don't think that's right. Anyway, he's Australian. He's an Australian person living in Canada. Great guy, a very talented game designer. If anyone's interested in tabletop strategy board games, very talented designer. Very accessible designer. And I think he'd give great answers to these questions.
Okay. I would like to tag Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a published author
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would be great.
who clearly has deep thoughts about Sherlock Holmes, because I don't know if you know this, but we're not doing the tag anymore, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, NBA star, has written a book about Mycroft Holmes solving crimes in Jamaica.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for the massive market in this audience of people who are really into sports and don't know a lot about authors, which is what this video is for, beyond his very impressive athletic achievements, is a top-tier intellectual. He's an incredibly intelligent person who's done a lot of intellectual and public service work. It's very impressive. So that's a great answer.
thanks for watching, Kareem, and everybody else. Bye.